First tonight, President Trump and the California Governor Gavin Newsom are at loggerheads after the president ordered more U.S. Marines and National Guard troops to put down protests in Los Angeles. The latest demonstrations against migrant arrests were mainly non-violent. The local police have said they don't need military deployment. Gavin Newsom said it was morally reprehensible to threaten the American people with their own military. The governor said the move was fulfilling the deranged fantasy of a dictatorial president. His criticism was echoed by local people and politicians. The mayor of LA, Karen Bass, accused the federal government of inciting chaos. President Trump is deploying another 2,000 National Guard troops to the city following 4 days of confrontations between protesters and security forces over immigration raids. He's also sending up to 700 Marines to help protect federal agents and buildings.
Some of the things you're reading about in Los Angeles, thank goodness we sent out some wonderful National Guard. They've really helped, and a lot of problems they were having out there. They were afraid to do anything, and we sent out the troops, and they've done a fantastic job. So I want to thank them very much.
In 2020, when you were talking about unrest in American cities, you said, quote, "We have to go by the laws. We can't call in the National Guard unless we're requested by a governor." What changed now? Why is this situation different to not consult with Governor Newsom about this?
Well, the biggest change from that statement is we have an incompetent governor. So I talked about governors, but I didn't talk about he's an incompetent governor. Look at the job he's doing in California. He's destroying one of our great states. And if I didn't get involved, if we didn't bring the Guard in, and we would bring more in if we needed it, because we have to make sure there's going to be law and order. You had a disaster happening.
Are you going to deploy Marines in California?
We'll see what happens. I mean, I think we have it very well under control. I think it would have been a very bad situation. It was heading in the wrong direction. It's now heading in the right direction. And we hope to have the support of Gavin, because Gavin's the big beneficiary as we straighten out his problems. I mean, his state is a mess.
What crime has Governor Newsom committed?
A crime has he committed? I think his primary crime is running for governor.
We'll never know what might have been had the president left our state and local authorities to continue the important work they were already doing and were more than capable of doing. What we do know is that what we saw yesterday happened after the president's unnecessary, counterproductive, and, most importantly, unlawful order. Trump and Hegseth jumped from 0 to 60, bypassing law enforcement expertise and evaluation. They threw caution to the wind.
And that's the Attorney General of California there. And before him, of course, Donald Trump. And since he gave that press conference, he has confirmed that he's sending 700 Marines, in addition to a total now of more than 4,000 National Guard to Los Angeles. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from London by the Republican strategist and chair of Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson. Great to see you, Greg. Do you think it is appropriate to send in the National Guard and even the Marines to deal with these protests in LA?
Charles, the simple answer is absolutely yes. It's common sense. I think the president learned some difficult lessons from the disaster in 2020 and the riots, especially in Minneapolis, when he waited and he actually ultimately did not send any troops or National Guard to Minneapolis, in addition to Seattle and Portland and San Francisco, all these cities that were really lit on fire by the mobs in 2020. So I think he wants to avoid that situation again. And it's better to be preemptive. I mean, this federal intervention has been swift and disciplined in its response. And in many ways, it's prevented further escalation. You've already seen it dialed down, at least versus 2 nights ago. And by the way, there was a lot of comments in the prologue there, but yes, the Democrats on the left are going to always criticize President Trump But in terms of, did they need federal intervention? The chief of police in Los Angeles, McDonnell, he actually said, this is on the first night, he said, this is out of hand. We need federal help. We will take federal help. We will gladly take federal help. So, this is just the president trying to make sure that it doesn't escalate. Were they peaceful protests? No, they were not. They're burning cars. You can see it on the video right now. They don't need help? No, they do. And again, I'm not criticizing the LAPD, the Los Angeles Police Department. It's that the governor and the mayor have really restricted the ability of the department, the enforcement agencies at a federal level from doing their job. So, this isn't like left versus right. This is just common sense.
But I mean, why would the president go over the head of the governor of the states? No consultation whatsoever. I mean, your party, the Republican Party, has always been so strong on states' rights against overreach, as you would see it from the federal authorities. I mean, if a Democrat president had ordered the Marines into a major Republican-controlled city, I mean, you'd be crying foul, wouldn't you, Greg?
Well, I think, it's a law and order party that we have, and in many respects, it's a law and order country, and I hope that continues. But I think it's important to understand that, the president only does this when he feels compelled. He's looking after the rights of the citizens of California. He wants to protect the citizens of California, and yes, protect federal workers, protect federal property. But remember, this is not partisan. John F. Kennedy, of course, sent 30,000 troops to Alabama. He actually he federalized the Alabama National Guard when George Wallace, a Democrat, would not integrate the schools. There's so much precedent here where a president, if they feel the governor is refusing to execute law that's been passed by Congress, which is exactly what's happened here. Governor Newsom would not enforce the laws of the United States. So I'm a federalist. I wish that states, I love states' rights. I want them to do what they do. I don't want too much regulation. I don't want too much taxation. But there is a point where federal law is important. That's why Abraham Lincoln sent troops to South Carolina at the beginning of the Civil War. That's why John F. Kennedy sent troops to integrate the schools when the Democrat governors of several states, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, the Little Rock Seven, they would not integrate their schools, and they felt it was important to send federal troops. So this is kind of a rounding error in terms of numbers, and most of the Marines, or none of the Marines, have been in the action in LA. They've been protecting some federal property. Most of the National Guard is just there as a deterrent. So it's actually worked. But I think it's a shame that Governor Newsom didn't reach out to the president for some support. And quite frankly, he wouldn't have needed the support if he did his job in the first place and wasn't preventing the ICE, which is the Immigration Enforcement Agency, to do their job. And if you don't like the law, the immigration laws of America, then change them, right? Vote for a different congressman or try to change the law. But right now, the law in the United States is to detain and deport illegal migrants, not migrants, just illegal migrants. Barack Obama did it quite comfortably and quite proudly because it was the law. President Trump is just following the law. President Biden chose not to follow the law.
It's interesting that all the officials in California are saying, including the police now, the LAPD, are saying we don't need there simply wasn't a problem in LA. The city was handling the protests and those on the streets with no difficulty, and that the escalation has all come from President Trump, especially using terms describing it as an insurrection. An insurrection is when people arm themselves to take power from the government, and that's what happened in the Capitol building on January the 6th.
I mentioned
On the Capitol building on January the 6th.
Yeah, well, I mentioned insurrection back in 1860 in the Civil War, and that was truly an insurrection. I wasn't referring to the other incidents, but remember, the president is not suggesting that he wants to intervene in states' rights or states' discipline. But if the states don't enforce the law, then he has to get involved. And by the way, I don't know where that information came from, but the Los Angeles police chief McDonnell said this is a problem. We're not handling this well. And also, if you just look at the footage, it's the classic media Democrat complex in America. These are mostly peaceful protests. Meanwhile, there's a church burning behind you. So, the footage is obvious, right? They're burning cars. And by the way, they're not burning cars in Beverly Hills or Bel Air or San Francisco, the nicer neighborhoods. They're burning cars in the neighborhoods of working people and hourly wage people that just can't afford to suffer like this. They're looting stores. They're destroying property in the city, in the parts of the city that can afford it least. And it's really a shame to see. And I think the president's doing a good job to intervene and stop this madness, stop this violence.
Well, as you said, Greg, I mean, there's a lot of concern. I mean, not you saying that, but a lot of other Americans are saying that they are concerned about the use of Marines who presumably are not specifically trained in crowd control being used on the streets of a major American city. I mean, as you correctly pointed out, they're protecting federal buildings for the moment. But I mean, you talked about the fact that the ICE are going after illegal immigrants. I mean, Californians tend to see their state as a sanctuary state. Would you accept the argument that California, and perhaps more broadly the US as a whole, needs migrants?
Well, of course we do. We need immigration. We don't need illegal immigration. And so that's the difference. And so the California sanctuary state status or sanctuary city status is against federal law. So, that's kind of probably the biggest problem here is that Governor Newsom refused to enforce federal law. And if he wanted to change that, he should change it through the legislative process. But this is something where if the governor refuses to enforce the law, then the federal government has to intervene. It's happened so many times. It happened with Eisenhower. It happened with John F. Kennedy. And, where they have to send troops and federalize the National Guard of certain states. We don't want that. We don't like to see that. But in this case, it was an extreme circumstance. And the people of California are the ones that are suffering. And again, it's only in the neighborhoods in LA and other cities in California where the people can least afford to have their stores looted and their cars burned. And it's really a shame to see it. I hope it ends quickly. I think it's already been dialed down because of the presence of Marines and National Guard. And I also point out, Charles, that Marines, the particular Marines from Camp Pendleton in California, are very well trained in riot control and crowd control. They also guard the embassies all over the world. So, they are a great fighting force. They're lethal machines, but they're also well trained at handling this kind of behavior as well.
And yet, Greg, when we see these ICE agents cracking down and people around the world see stories of people separated from their children as they're carried away to be deported. I mean, that image of America as a welcoming place, a place for immigrants, is taking a battering, is it not?
Yeah, I hope not. But look, we are a nation of immigrants. My grandparents were immigrants. This is all good, but they came here legally. And I think there's, the reason that so much of this perception is unpleasant is it's driven by the media left complex in the U.S. And it's really unfortunate. That Barack Obama, who was a Democrat, I'll remind you, and his Justice Department, including Cecilia Munoz, whose recordings have been distributed quite a bit on in the media lately, they were very adamant about, and she said quite plainly, we are following the law. We will deport people, even if we have to separate families. There's some nuance there, but this all started in the Obama administration, and it was ceased in the Biden administration. but it's unpleasant. And President Trump has made every effort to do this peacefully. He's offered illegal migrants $1,000 to raise their hand and go through the process. I mean, he's done everything he can. But if he was elected, one of the big issues for this election was the migrant crisis, the illegal migrant crisis, where 10 million illegal migrants came into the country during the Biden years. That's being kind. It's probably more. But this is why mass deportation, which again, Barack Obama did that, President Trump in his first term, it's polling at 67 with Hispanics. It's polling at 65 with Kamala Harris voters. This is an 80-20 issue that I'm shocked that the Democrats are going to die on this hill of encouraging and supporting criminals and these rioters that are burning cars and looting stores. It's a political malpractice. President Trump will come out of this looking pretty good.
On that note, Greg, I want to thank you very much indeed. As always, Greg Swenson is a Republican strategist and chair of Republicans Overseas UK. He was talking to me on the line there from London.